The mainstream media tries to gaslight the Minneapolis riots, all as urban violence is red-pilling more Americans than ever. In this video, we're going to take a look at the ridiculous attempt by the mainstream media to cover up the violent riots that are once again plaguing the city of Minneapolis, how a cultural Marxist narrative is behind such a cover-up, and we're going to look at a study that shows that urban unrest is turning more and more Americans away from the Democrat left. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Wonderful to be with you. As always, we're here to give you each and every single day conservative hope in the midst of these turbulent and trying times, helping to think better so you can feel better and provide for you a patriot path to freedom. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we begin, we've all experienced blackouts, particularly at night. That strange, bizarre feeling you get when the power grid goes out and our homes go completely dark. Well, I'm preparing for my next blackout with a wonderful device called the Light Bug. The Light Bug is a portable, solar-powered, ultra-bright floodlight with 3 lighting modes. And because it's solar-powered, you'll never, ever have to worry about wires or batteries. And because it comes with a battery indicator, you'll always know how much charge is left. It's perfect to light up your fishing, your hiking, your camping trips because it's so lightweight and portable. And best of all, if you click on that link below today, you're going to get 15% off your order. So make sure to click on that link below or head on over to lightbug.com and get your emergency backup light today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. The city of Minneapolis, of course, has once again erupted into violent riots, this time for the second straight night since the police-involved shooting of the 20-year-old Daunte Wright. Over 40 people were arrested last night after rioters and police clashed in Brooklyn Center, a city just north of Minneapolis and just 10 miles away from the spot where George Floyd died. Numerous businesses were, of course, looted, vandalized, but for some reason, the left-wing activists disguised as journalists actually took offense at calling these riots, well, riots. Astonishingly, reporters scolded the Minneapolis police chief for using the term riot to describe the violence that's taking place. When police chief Tim Gannon described how he and his officers were front and center at the riot, a reporter immediately interjected, "Don't do that. Don't use that word." And another reporter pushed back as well. That was not a riot. Can you believe that? The mainstream media is not reporting the news. They are actively crafting and fabricating. They're constructing it according to their own, as we'll find out, cultural Marxist narrative. Fortunately, the police chief didn't back down. Quote, "It was a riot. The officers that were putting themselves in harm's way were being pelted with frozen cans of pop, and they were being pelted with concrete blocks. What the hell else are you going to call it?" So fortunately, we've got some brass there that's willing to push back against these leftist activists disguised as journalists. The police officer involved in the shooting has been identified. Her name is Kimberly A. Potter, a 25-year veteran with the Brooklyn Center Police Department. The shooting has been determined to be what's called an accidental discharge, as Officer Potter meant to fire a taser, not her handgun. It's being reported that Officer Potter's clearly heard warning on the video there, warning Daunte Wright that she's going to tase him if he doesn't comply with the arrest. She says over and over again, "I will tase you. I will taser." And then after the shooting, you can hear her remorsefully saying immediately, exasperated, "Holy crap, I just shot the guy." So it appears to be a pretty clear case of an accidental discharge. But more and more pundits are asking the obvious question. Why is it that every time there's a police-involved shooting of a black suspect, no matter what the occasion, riots suddenly engulf our cities for the next several days? Well, to answer that question, we don't have to go any farther than the absurd racist banter coming from Minnesota's governor, Tim Walz, who tweeted out, quote, "I am closely monitoring the situation in Brooklyn Center. Gwen and I are praying for Daunte Wright's family as our state mourns another life of a black man taken by law enforcement." I'm glad to see there's been a massive pushback against the governor. The Minnesota GOP are calling for the governor to self-censor in response to his clearly throwing law enforcement under the bus in his attempt to racialize the incident. But as we talked about in yesterday's video, what both the governor's comments clearly exemplify, as well as the mainstream media's attempt to gaslight these riots, what they both exemplify is a racial logic rooted in the ascent of cultural Marxism, which is currently dominating both the mainstream media and the Democratic Party, not to mention the corporatist globalist oligarchs who are trying desperately to impose far-left sentiments on the public at large. What we have to understand is that in the 1960s, a new racial logic emerged in our college campuses that reimagined Western culture as a binary of antithetical power distributions, right? In other words, society is made up of a massive power discrepancy between what cultural Marxists would call a dominant colonialist power, which is often labeled white and male, that disenfranchises politically and socially minority cultures through racist and sexist exclusions. So this is why white supremacism and male patriarchy are blamed for quite literally every sin under the sun. And within this framework of oppressor versus oppressed, racism itself was reimagined as something that applies only to those who have the power to oppress and to dominate. Those who are being oppressed or dominated, they cannot by definition be racist. So take, for example, this passage in a manual compiled by affirmative action officer Carolyn Pitts. Quote, "In the United States at present, only whites can be racist, since whites dominate and control the institutions that create and enforce American cultural norms and values. Blacks and other third world peoples do not have access to the power to enforce any prejudices they may have, so they cannot, by definition, be racists." So this is what's known as the prejudice plus power redefinition of racism. Only populations with power can be considered racist. Those who are victims and oppressed, by definition, are immune from ever being accused of racism. So that's the prejudice plus power redefinition of racism. And so this is why whenever a black man is shot by a cop, it cannot by definition be seen as an isolated incident. The shooting is by definition of this cultural Marxist racial logic symptomatic of white supremacist oppression, which dominates all social institutions, most especially law enforcement. And of course, what's so bizarre in all this is that the only people who ultimately end up getting hurt are more blacks, more minorities, black lives, black-owned businesses, black-owned cars, right, parked in the streets. They're the ones that are getting looted and destroyed and vandalized and burned as a result of these riots. And so the irony here is that what the cultural Marxist narrative has done is it's provoked a kind of mass self-immolation among urban populations. Think about that, right? All this cultural Marxist racial logic has done is further oppress the very populations cultural Marxists claim they're liberating. It turns out that cultural Marxists don't appear to have taken the logic of self-immolation in consideration in all of this. Scholars have long noted that self-immolation, publicly burning oneself, going on a hunger strike, the act of publicly killing oneself for political and religious reasons, it's widely recognized as the single most extreme form of protest. Self-immolation, a public act of self-destruction, is widely considered the most extreme form of protest. And that is what this cultural Marxist narrative has ultimately provoked. Far from awakening the population at large to embrace the radical left worldview, cultural Marxism is ultimately serving to destroy the very communities and demographics that the proponents of this cultural Marxism claim to be liberating. And to make matters even worse, it's not just a matter of self-immolation and the destruction of the very neighborhoods and communities that cultural Marxists claim to be saving. That destruction is in turn red-pilling more Americans like never before. But before we get into that, make sure to click on the link below and register for our upcoming new Conservative Patriot Live benefit conference, which we're holding this weekend on April 16th to 17th. It's a virtual conference, so you don't even have to leave the comfort of your home. You can sit in your sofa and you can secure your own seat simply by clicking on the link below. We're going to be focusing on how you and I can together rise up against woke cancel culture and build back the world that we know and love together. And so we're going to be answering a question that patriots have been asking for months, but conservatives have not answered. What do I do? I know things may be moving in our direction. I know more and more people are getting red-pilled. I know that patriot movements and leaders are springing up all over the world. But in the meantime, with bumbling Biden, what do we do? And that appears to be, we're going to be doing for the very first time, we're going to give you an entire 2-day conference answering that very question, what you can do to secure your freedom from woke insanity once and for all. Now, tickets are going fast. Seating is limited. So if you want to secure your seat, make sure to click on that link below because ticket prices are going up right before the Patriot live event. So don't miss it. Click on that link below, and I will see you for a weekend that promises to be a game changer in our lives like never before. All right, gang. So we've talked on our videos over the summer about this, but when the riots first started breaking out, after the whole George Floyd incident, we talked about a study that shows that acts of civil violence and destruction have the effect of making America more conservative. It was a study that was conducted by Omar Wazal. He's an assistant professor at the Department of Politics at Princeton University. And he published a paper concluding that the political effects of riots consistently benefit the political right. And what he did is he focused particularly on the race-related riots in the 1960s, and he found that on a county-by-county basis, urban riots resulted in a significant decline in Democrat vote share in the 1964, 68, and 72 presidential elections, the latter two exemplifying a Nixonian law and order backlash that drove a wave of anti-rioter legislation that lasted for decades. And what we found, too, was that this Princeton study corroborates earlier studies that have found that there is a clear connection between the perpetuation of terrorist acts and an observable increase in support for the political right. So studies of the Israeli electorate found that elections held within just a few months of a violent terrorist attack caused an increase in support for the political right. And here's the key, that happened even within left-leaning localities. Another study detailed how repeated exposure to rocket threats shifted Israeli voter support to right-wing nationalists during the election from the year 2000-2010. And we see a comparable turn towards nationalist parties as well in Turkey in response to attacks by Kurdish PKK militants. In other words, violence turns populations to the right. That's the argument. If these studies are accurate, we can expect then that these riots are red-pilling Americans like nothing else. In radical contrast to the way the mainstream Marxist media tries to present things, don't say riot, these riots are not driving people to support more Democrats. They're driving more and more people away from the Democrats and hopefully to a supermajority that will vote these cultural Marxist politicians out of office once and for all. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, subscribe to my channel. Definitely click on the link below and check out some of our awesome merch. And you definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on how Twitter is censoring criticism of a Black Lives Matter founder's $1.4 million home. All of CNN actually confuses two Asian golfers. It's actually hilarious, and this is after they were lecturing us about Asian racism. You're not gonna want to miss this. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.